Good morning, boys and girls, and happy Friday. I first want to get started by going over the two problems that I gave you at the end of yesterday's video. I asked you to convert these fractions into decimals. So let's do the first one, 77 hundredths. I can see that there's no whole number before, so I'm going to put a 0, and I put my point. And then in the tens place, there's a 7, and in the hundredths place, there's a 7, so I write it as 0.77, which reads as 77 hundredths. The next one, I have no whole number before, so I put a 0. I put my decimal, and in the tenths place, I have a 2, and in the hundredths place, I have my 8. So I write it as 0.28, which reads as 28 hundredths. For today, we're going to be doing something very similar, but we're actually going to show how many tenths and how many hundredths are in a decimal. So, for example, let's do this. It's 3 100ths. They gave us a fraction, and they first want us to make it a decimal. I have to put my 0 because there's no whole number in front, and then I put a decimal point. As you can see, there's no number in front of this 3, so we have, since it's over 100, we have to put a 0 first, and then we put our 3. So it should be written as 0.03, which reads as 3 hundredths. But then it asks us how many tenths and how many hundredths are in this decimal. And when I say it asks us, I'm talking about we're actually doing problems from the workbook that we would have been doing if we were in class. So how many tenths? We look at the tenths place, there are 0. How many hundredths? We look at the hundredths place, there are 3. So that's what we're going to be doing for today's problem set. The next one is 15 hundredths. First thing we must do is make this into a decimal. I do not have a whole number, so I put my 0, then I put my decimal. And the tenths place is the 1, hundredths place is the 5, so I write it as 0.15. So that reads as 15 hundredths. Then it wants me to write how many tenths and how many hundredths. So I look at the tens place first. There is 1. And how many hundredths? There are 5. Alright, we're going to do 2 more together, and then I'll give you one bonus one that if you do and you send it to me, I will give you an extra dojo. So our next one, instead of them giving us the fraction, they're actually going to give us the decimal, and we have to convert it to a fraction. So 72 hundredths is how it is written in decimal, in the decimal form. So I would write it as a fraction as 72 over 100. Then I'm going to write how many tenths there are and how many hundredths there are. Tenths, I look at the tenths place, there are 7. And I look at the hundredths, there are 2. Alright, we have one more to do together. 80 hundredths. They wrote this as a fraction. So some of you may be tricked by this. So first we have to look and see if there's any whole numbers. There's not, so I write my 0 and I put my point. Then I look and see the tenths place. There are 8 and there is 0 hundredths. So when I write it out, how many tenths and how many hundredths, there are, how many tenths? There are 8 tenths and 0 hundredths. So 80 100ths is actually the same as 8 tenths. So if you were to cover up the last 2 zeros, you can see that it's 8 tenths. Same if you took away this 0, it's 8 tenths. So the one question that I want you to do on your own, I'm going to give it to you in decimal form. It is 0.48, so 48 hundredths, and I want you to write that as a fraction, and I need you to tell me how many tenths there are and how many hundredths there are. So this one you're going to do on your own, and you can earn some extra dojos. I hope you have a great weekend. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I can't wait to work with you on Monday. Bye.